Hello and welcome to a Bible study with Paul Hart. Today's subject is Elijah and Elisha's miracles.
Elijah and Elisha's miracles, Study 3, the widow's son raised to life. When we are to help anyone and develop a relationship as servants of God, matters come up and we have to respond and become extended, often far beyond our initial helpful ministry. As we are the church of the living God, this applies to all of us. This now happens to Elijah, and he is called to solve a much greater problem than providing a continual supply of oil and flour for the daily needs. This is in fact an unprecedented first time raising from the dead. What a challenge, and just maybe you might need to do something for the Lord which is a first time for you too. A sick child dies. Who's to blame? Let's take a reading from 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 17 and 18.
Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?"
The widow's son, who has been miraculously provided for, now falls sick and dies. Death and sicknesses leading to death raises the eternal question of why has this happened and who is to blame. It seems our natural, worldly and fleshly response is common to all humanity, and we need faith to lift us out of it. We blame ourselves. The widow focuses first on her past and that she is the cause, and hence responsible, as she says, "Remind me of my sin." What that sin was, we do not know. Maybe sex outside of marriage, adultery, or worship of other gods, as she is living in Sidon. Was it directly connected with her son? We may not know what the sin is, but she does. And this loss brings it all up again in her mind. We blame God. She immediately blames Elijah for bringing this punishment on her from God. Blame God's servants or God himself. So many use this as an excuse not to believe in God, saying, "How can God allow such evil and wars?" And they turn away. The death of her son is now linked in her moment of grief and guilt to Elijah's coming. God can, if he will, apportion blame on Judgment Day, but we must leave it to him and look now to our own life before a just and all-knowing God. We look for blame. John chapter 9, verses 1 to 4. And we should read this because this is just so common of what we can do today.
As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work."
This is common to us all, and the disciples fell into this trap when they saw the man born blind from birth. They asked Jesus who was to blame as to the cause of his blindness. Was it this man or his parents who sinned? Directly linking a sin to a direct disastrous incident seems to be our normal way of thinking. It wasn't Jesus' explanation in this case. He simply said, "Neither, but he must do the work to help while he can." to bring God's glory into the situation. Connect the sentences as there is no full stop in the original Greek. God's glory comes when the work of God proceeds. In the Garden of Eden, Adam blamed Eve. Eve blamed the serpent. No accepting of sinful responsibility here or repentance. We must stop blaming and start powerfully solving problems and situations for God's glory. Elijah goes to prayer, crying out to God. Now let's read from 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 19 to 21.
"Give me your son," Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought tragedy also upon this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him."
Elijah immediately takes on the burden of rising to the occasion of need, but away from the faithless grief and guilt of the widow. He takes the child into his own room, away with God alone, just as Peter did with Dorcas in Joppa in Acts chapter 9. Stretching himself out on the dead boy 3 times, Elijah cries out to God. Why do this? Did he want to impart something of his life and comfort or heat? As later, Elisha would do the same, and that child warmed in 2 Kings chapter 4. Was this something of a compassionate reaching out like a mother to a baby full of concern and love? Paul the Apostle threw his arms around the sleepy lad who died after falling out of an upstairs window. Here was deep emotion and compassion linked with faith. Jesus, after he had compassion for the crowds, proceeded to heal them all. Great miracles can result when our deep feelings are godly. King David in the first verse of Psalm 61 writes, "Hear my cry, O Lord, attend unto my prayer." Distress leads God's people to cry out to the God who only has all the solutions to all the problems. The Lord hears and responds. The child lives. 1 Kings chapter 17, 22 to 24.
The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." Then the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth."
Yes, God heard Elijah's cry, and the child was restored to life, and he presented the child to his mother. Now she confesses her acknowledgement that Elijah was a real man of God. Wasn't the miraculous act of supplying oil and flour daily enough for this declaration? But here is more. The word from your mouth is the truth. With the religious gods and the occult character of the area, in the other nations round about, with only limited power, resurrection is an unbelievable matter. A level above everything she may have seen or heard of. This man's words are true and to be relied upon. So should our words be today also. Elijah now has a reputation and accreditation he never had before. More importantly, his ministry points to the all-powerful God of Israel. Now here's a wonderful testimony of a miracle that happened one Sunday morning. Many years ago, in our morning Believers Communion service, A report of a lady of the fellowship probably being in hospital to have the baby was mentioned. We didn't know whether she was or wasn't, it's just that the car at the house was missing. We then prayed for a blessing and help at about 11 a.m. early in the service. There was no consciousness of a problem, just a need to help in the Lord for the birth of the baby from pregnancy. At that exact moment, the child was born. The doctors, nurses and grandmother present reflected shock on their faces as it appeared to be lifeless. No one moved. Disastrous. Immediately and spontaneously, the child burst into cry, and all these years later is a strong, polite young man. God was so good. We had no idea what was going to happen. All we did is praying with a desire to help. But look what he did. I've interviewed both the grandmother and mother yesterday. They agreed to put this little testimony in, and they agreed that this was indeed a miraculous intervention of God's grace and love. How wonderful our God is. Provide for the widow's son. He provided this family here, and the sky's the limit when we just bring our simple prayers to the Lord and trust Him in faithful, prayerful and helpful actions. May God bless you all.